Hello and welcome to Dr. Poole's SharePoint Surgery session, Top Strategies for Managing Projects with SharePoint. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. If you're interested in trying out the enterprise version of Harmony, please send us a request in the chat window and someone will contact you after the webinar to get you started. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available to you within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Poole, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. Richard heads up the pre-sales team for Harmony across the EMEA and Asia Pacific regions, working both directly with key accounts as well as Harmony's partner channel. Bringing with him 18 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize the significant benefits in productivity that collaborative platforms enable. Before joining Harmony in 2011, Richard worked for Dassault Systems PLM for over 10 years. Richard also has a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you, Susan, and welcome everybody to this month's session. So I think, first off, we wanted to kind of just clarify what we're talking about when we say project management. And I think it applies to certain industries specifically, but also, I mean, there's many different industries that really kind of work around projects. And some examples of those are, for example, the construction industry, where every kind of building that is planned and built is built around a project. It could be like a school being built. It could be a tower block being built or whatever. But there's kind of common tendencies with how, or behaviors and how documents and the projects themselves are actually managed. Because they have a certain timeline, for example, they have lots of interaction with different parties that are changing all the time, and suppliers and subcontractors and resources. And that kind of all comes into the kind of umbrella of kind of project management, because a project manager needs to basically keep on top of all of those moving parts. And some other examples, like it could be a transportation project, implementing a new infrastructure for like a new railway line, or it could be even developing a new product. Could be seen as managing as a project. It could be a new car model, or it could be a new aircraft. Particularly like in the aerospace industry, like each plane is configured specifically for that customer, and there's lots, again, there's lots of different moving parts, lots of different suppliers, and all of those suppliers, need to work together, as well as with the overall kind of project management team and things. And even it could be consultancy projects. You take on a new project and you need to map out what the goals and objectives of the project are, what the budget is, and what the costs involved are, and the timelines and stuff. So there's really, a lot of, as I say, a lot of moving parts involved in project management, and we're obviously going to be focusing on some of those today, and really, the key challenges that brings. So we'd just like to ask you a poll question.
Great. So how do you currently manage your project documentation, your communication calendars and tasks? Are you using file shares, Exchange, Microsoft Project, SharePoint, or another project management system? We'll give you a little bit of time here to answer. There you go, Richard. I'm going to share the information there with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for participating. So we can see that the vast majority of you are using SharePoint to manage those kind of parts of a project. But some people are using some other systems, some other project management systems, and also there's a reasonable amount of people using file shares, which I'm not surprised at. Obviously that's typically where people have been in the past. But obviously SharePoint is a good option as a single platform to manage all the elements, and particularly around the documents that are involved in a project and things as well. So what are the main challenges in managing a project? I think, firstly, you've got to kind of set out what the plan for the project is. So there's a lot of components in that. And I think, tools like, for example, Microsoft Project are great at being able to map out, a Gantt chart of, what stages there are in the project and what are the milestones and the timelines and resources and things. But it's very, very difficult to kind of maintain that project plan. So, I've seen many times in the past, like a big plan printed out on the kind of like team in a meeting room or something of this is the original plan, but kind of it changes on a daily basis, and the milestones change and the tasks are changing. It might be there's unforeseen incidents that have occurred in the project or unforeseen, for example, again, if we took at, say, construction, like kind of the weather could be a massive change in the plan, and you can't really plan for that way in advance. But also it might be like that you've come across something that maybe the suppliers need to be changed, or the resources aren't available anymore that you had planned or whatever. So that's constantly changing. And obviously everything around a project is based on those timelines and the budgets involved in that. And obviously a lot of projects end up overrunning and being over budget. And that's obviously not ideal, and it's not what you want. So you really want to be able to keep on top of that and be able to kind of learn from previous projects, but also maintain what the current plan is and any kind of contingency plans and things around any changes. But there's also a lot of communication. As I say, obviously, there's a team or a project manager looking after the project at the top level, but basically they are interacting with many, many different people that are involved in that project, and they could be internal, they could be external suppliers, contractors, etc., external consultants, for example. So there's a lot of communication, and that might be over the phone, it might be face-to-face meetings, but a lot of it is done by email. I mean, that's what people are used to using. It's also kind of, traceable. I can see who's who sent what and when and those kind of things. But a lot of the time, those emails are tied up in, an individual's mailbox. And there could be lots of documentation that's sent by email as well. And you do need to be able to track who said what, where, and when, and why, particularly if something is overrunning. And as I say, also the fact that the project members can be changing all the time. So it might be like the project manager at the beginning of the project is actually ends up being somebody different further down the project. And if mails, for example, are stored in that individual's mailbox, nobody else has access to, then it's very difficult to kind of see an overall picture of all the relevant information in one place. And also, I think, as a project evolves, there's different challenges as well. Documentation can change vastly throughout the project. What you plan right at the beginning in the planning stages can be very different to the kind of execution stages and then the kind of maintenance stages. And there's different kinds of documentation, but as I say, there's lots of different iterations of those as well. And I think also if people are having to use lots of different systems to actually access all of that, it can be very time consuming, and it's not very natural for end users. So the ideal would be to have a single system that everybody can kind of is already spending their time in and can interact with the relevant elements that they need. Throughout the whole process, right from concept through to delivery. And also being able to access all that relevant information from different devices and from different places. Because it could be, again, like somebody's out on site for a site inspection, and they're not necessarily going to have an internet connection or have their laptop with them. They may just have a tablet or a smartphone, and being able to both access content from those kind of scenarios, but also capture content. I mean, particularly say, if you need to take a picture of an incident that's occurred on a particular site, then getting that into a single repository and sharing it with the rest of the project team is in a timely fashion and with the relevant information is really important. So obviously you've already, I think most people have said that they are using SharePoint in some way to manage their project information. So is SharePoint the best platform? Well, it's a very good platform, and it's an excellent platform, but it's not really the natural place for people to spend their time. It's a lot of people spend their time in, for example, Outlook. That's the application that they open at the beginning of the day, and then they're interacting with. So kind of going to a completely new browser interface, and it may be that they've come from like a previous system or whatever that is very bespoke for particularly project management, and kind of moving to SharePoint can be a real challenge for a lot of people. So it's a great platform, but I don't know that it's necessarily the best single interface for what users need in their day-to-day work. So that's where Harmony comes in, because Harmony is your day-to-day front end into that platform. It's integrated into the place where you're spending your time in Outlook, but it's also exposing all the different components that you need to access to get your project work done, whether that's documents, tasks, calendars, and those kind of things, all in one single interface. And also, you can utilize all the kind of metadata that you want people to be using, and also moving away from that kind of comfort zone of using file shares that I think a few people were still using in the poll earlier. And having a single interface means that I can move through the kind of different entities, whether it's my OneDrive for my personal documentation when I'm maybe conceptually looking at some ideas, but also utilizing things like teams and groups in Office 365 to then share some content that maybe we've got some ideas with and we want to bounce around about a new potential project, and then be able to work in SharePoint for any project that is actually going ahead. So there's a lot of value in having that kind of single interface into all the different elements of the platform. So with that, we'd just like to ask another question on how you're using SharePoint.
So please let us know as many of these are using SharePoint to manage projects. What type of data? Documents, tasks, calendars, contacts, custom lists. And we'll give you, again, a little bit of time here. Okay, here you go, Richard.
Okay, thank you. So we can see, obviously, I mean, pretty much everybody's using it for document management, but there's a reasonable split between all the other elements of tasks and contacts, calendars, and custom lists. So it's good to see that people are using SharePoint for more than just document management with regard to projects. But it's definitely, the main focus, I would say, is documents, because at the end of the day, the document is potentially what is delivered, what's delivered to the client or to the project members and things. So that's, thank you for participating in that one. So I think, the first thing that we want to kind of address is how do you actually collaborate with the different people in the project team and or the extended project team, because it's quite different how you interact with, for example, your colleagues in the same organization, your partners in suppliers and the supply chain and contractors and things, but also the actual end client as well. And there's different elements of being able to kind of capture documentation and share that content with those colleagues and team members. Being able to send documents, for example, as both links and attachments, depending on who you actually need to share them with, but also capturing, for example, metadata nice and easily and maintaining kind of version control, whether you're working with an internal colleague, an external partner, or the client themselves. And as I say, there's different scenarios to actually work with each of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how Harmony can facilitate each of those types of interactions. So if I just switch to my Outlook here, you'll see that Harmony is basically available as a sidebar within my Outlook interface. So obviously at any point in time, I can just go into SharePoint and open that site in a browser, for example. So Harmony is not completely replacing SharePoint in a browser interface, but it's kind of really complementing it. So for example, here, if I go into this construction site that we're going to use for part of this scenario, we can see all the document libraries and the list types and things that I've got access to there. But what I really want to do is I actually want to capture some content, because here in my email, where I'm spending my time, I can see that I've actually received some communication by email that relates to the project that I'm working on. So I need to capture that information. And I can easily navigate around my SharePoint content within the Harmony sidebar. And I can see, for example, that I'm actually organizing the content in this particular library by metadata. We do support things like folders and document sets and things as well, but are very much focused on getting people to use metadata in a natural way. So we can see here that Harmony supports all the different views that I've got configured here. So I can actually represent the content in different ways. So for example, if I want to see just the emails that I've captured against each of these projects, I can set up views in SharePoint to do that and display corresponding metadata. So how do I get that content into SharePoint in the first place? So for example, here, if I've got this email that relates to the project I'm working on, this alpha project. So I've actually received like this kind of go ahead email. So I'm going to just drag and drop that into that library. And in this case, I can actually drag it on top of an existing property, in this case, the project name, and I can choose to tag it automatically with that information. So what that's going to do when I'm saving that email is going to capture it into SharePoint. It's going to save it as a fully contained MSG file, so I can actually use it in the future. I can respond to it. Other people in the project can access it. But also it's setting, for example, the content type and capturing all the header information from the email of who it was sent from and to, when it was sent, not just when I've saved it into SharePoint, but actually when it was sent originally. As I say, the metadata there is automatically being populated because I dragged it onto that particular property. And also we can create things like unique names for those emails. So if if somebody else has copied on this email and they try to save it with the same information to the same library, it would actually be considered the same email, so they'd get a message that already existed. But Harmony obviously presents all the metadata there in a very nice, easy to use manner for the end user. So I can go ahead and just save that. It's going to be captured, as I say, with all that information, and you can see there the view is updated with that. Also, if I've got maybe some documentation that relates to this project as well. So again, if I just change that view just for a moment and say, well, I've actually received some documentation, maybe this particular contract from the client, then I can just drag and drop that in exactly the same way to tag it with the same information. At this point, I'm actually using different content types. So, for example, here I can say that this is a proposal for a new contract with a new project, and then I'm going to be prompted to fill that data in. So again, making it as easy as possible for the end user to actually fill that information in and work with the system, not against it. So this really helps people to have an easy way to capture that information, but then also maintain it as well. Because it may be, for example, I've actually got some documents in a file share, like people said earlier, that I need to capture into this particular project as well. So maybe I want to, I've got some initial plans or something for this particular project, and I'm just going to take those and again drag them in and tag them with that information as well. So very, very nice and easily, I can really capture my content into SharePoint, as I say, in a very, very natural way. It's nice and quick. It's not blocking my Outlook, so I can carry on working while that is actually happening. And as I say, I can do that on multiple items as well. So that's just going to go into SharePoint. And very quickly, you can see that I've pulled together, all the documentation and communication that relates to this particular project. But now if I actually want somebody to make a change to one of these documents, so if we look at that kind of, how do I actually then collaborate with some colleagues? So for example, it might be, I've got a document here that I want to send out to somebody. So if I compose a new email, we'll see that Harmony is available within the email messages that I'm actually composing as well. And you'll see that it even just remembers exactly where I was a moment ago, what I'm looking at, and the items that I had selected. So for example, here, I could just send an email, let's say to Susan, to say that maybe I'm working on this new project, and we need to discuss some of the content. So say this is a new project, and I can say, hi Susan, please review the, and then I can just drag and drop that document into the body of the email. It's really nice and easy. It's very straightforward. I think it's something that people can pick up straight away with very, very little kind of instruction on how they need to work. But also because I might be working with clients and colleagues in the same kind of project, I don't necessarily know if Susan has access to this document. So when I hit send on that, Harmony can actually prompt me to say, actually, that user doesn't have access to this document. So do you want to grant them view or edit capabilities? And also, even if they're an external party, we can utilize, and if you've got it enabled in your SharePoint environment, the external sharing capabilities coming from SharePoint as well. But also, it might be that actually Susan's from the client, and I'm not going to give her access to my SharePoint, and maybe we don't have external sharing switched on. So I actually need to send it to Susan as an attachment. So I can do that simply by holding down the Alt key while I drag and drop, and then the document will be attached to the email. Now, something that obviously that's still quite a common scenario, that I do need to send some documents as attachments. And when I actually receive, for example, an attachment back from somebody with some changes made to it, in this case, maybe somebody's changed the file name or whatever, and I maybe want to save that as a new version. of that document. So I can simply drag and drop that back on top of an existing document. If I wait for a few seconds, I can choose to add it as a new version to the existing document in SharePoint. So one of the other challenges that we mentioned earlier was really being able to access content from different devices and different places. So obviously we've touched on Harmony in Outlook, and we'll look at that a little bit more first. But also, it's not only available in Outlook because okay, Outlook might be open most of the day, but it's not necessarily the only application that people have open. And it might be people, planning a lot of project, spend a lot of time in Excel or in Word, for example, or maybe they're compiling lots of presentations to present the current findings or the current status and things. So actually from within the other Office applications, being able to save content to SharePoint and open content from SharePoint is really important. And also when you're on the road as well, as I say, if you're on site at for the project, being able to access content from tablets and phones is really important as well. So let's take a look at some of the different kind of flavors of where I can access my content. So for example, I can see here that not only can I access the documents for this particular project in SharePoint, from SharePoint in Outlook, but also if I go up a level there to the site, I can see that actually I've got some other lists. And I think a lot of people mentioned that they were using other list types around project management. So for example, here in this common scenario is that I've got a task list for this particular project. And I can see, for example, what the current status of each task is. I can see the different views to say, okay, what tasks are overdue and haven't been completed yet. And I can go ahead and either add new tasks from here, or I can edit a task directly from here as well. So it might be, for example, okay, this is well overdue now, so and it's only 50% completed. So maybe I need to assign it to a different user. So in this case, let's search for somebody in SharePoint because it might be Fred's not available on this project anymore. So I'm going to actually assign that to Angela instead. So I can go ahead and reassign that particular task. And maybe like it's not been, I don't want it to be deferred, I want it to be back in progress again. I can also attach documents to those tasks and things as well directly from here. So I can choose to browse to a document, or I can drag documents directly into the task itself. And I can then actually maintain those project tasks. So I can, for example, see here, what are my tasks? What tasks are assigned to me? And I can go ahead and update them accordingly. So it's a nice and easy way to actually work on all the elements of a project directly from within Harmony in Outlook. As I mentioned, Outlook isn't the only application I might be using. So for example, if I'm working on a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation, I can also see that I've got functionality from within the ribbon there to say I want to maybe save this document to SharePoint, and then I can choose the locations and browse around the sites that I'm connected to, my OneDrive and things. So for example, if we go to that construction site that we were using in Outlook, we can actually see that I can navigate around to actually select where I want to save that content to. We can also access that kind of interface or that mechanism in a few different ways as well. So here we can see, okay, do I want to save it to that project documentation library that we were using before? And for example, assign the metadata and those kind of things. So I can see the existing documents there and go ahead and save that. and then fill in all the relevant metadata and things in a similar way to how we did in Outlook. So you can see here that the project name is required. I can go ahead and say that, okay, this relates to that alpha project, and go ahead and save. But as I say, if you don't want to use like ribbon controls there, you can also use the kind of standard save functionality, and Harmony integrates to that as well. So if I'm working on a document, I can click on the, you'll see that I've got like a section here for the Harmony favorites. So these are any locations that I've marked as a favorite in my Harmony sidebar in Outlook. I can then actually select those locations directly from this kind of standard interface in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint as well. Now, we also obviously spoke about accessing content from a mobile device. So let's take a look at what that looks like on my iPad. There we go. So the Harmony Mobile is an app that's available for iOS, Android, and in fact also Windows Phone and BlackBerry 10 as well. But it means that I can access the same content that I had on, for example, my Outlook interface. So it might be that I want to get to the same kind of content that I had access to on my laptop. So again, kind of like the calendar that it might be associated with a project, the tasks that we just updated a moment ago, and I can continue working whether I'm on a desktop or a laptop, a smartphone or a tablet. But also I can mark locations here as favorites as well. So for example, here I've got this project documentation as a favorite, and these favorites can be synchronized between all the different interfaces. And I can also mark them for offline access as well, particularly on a mobile device. So for example, here I can see that I've got a number of favorites, and I'm actually synchronizing, let's say, that alpha project to my iPad. So I see that it's actually synchronizing those in the background and making them available to me. So even if I now, for example, just cut into that and go offline, I'll go into flight mode, we can see that Harmony detects that I'm disconnected from the internet and from my SharePoint, so it works in an offline mode there. And I can then see, for example, the floor plans that were available to me earlier, or maybe the emails that we captured from Outlook, and I can easily view those on a mobile device. So, for example, here I can even see that a document is available there, and I can open that up, I can review it, I can make some changes to it, and I can synchronize those back when I go back online. And something that's very common, again, like if there's an incident that I'm doing a site visit, then I can actually capture new documents, I can capture images. Maybe I need to take a photo from the phone or from the tablet and capture it into SharePoint. When I go back online, it will actually be synchronized into SharePoint for me. So the other thing is kind of like keeping on top of the progress of a project. And obviously, yes, we can see that I can go and have a look at the status of things, and I can proactively go and find that information. But what we can also do is actually inform you when there's new updates. And rather than receiving lots of email notifications and telling you to go somewhere else, what we can do across both mobile and desktop is actually allow you to follow items for activity. So it could be a task list, it could be a document library or an event or something that you are following, and you'll be notified when there's new updates. So let's take a look at that in both the mobile and then the desktop as well. So if we go to my iPad again for a second, you'll see that I have an update stream, And I can see, for example, that there's been some new emails captured against a particular library that I'm following, or there might be some new documentation. And everything here is fully contextual. So, for example, I can go ahead and select the document that maybe my colleague Annie has been capturing, and it will take me directly to that document. If I want to go to the location, then I can simply select the location, in this case, like this document library, and it will take me directly there. Likewise, as I say, on the desktop, it works in a very similar way. So I have an update stream that shows me those same kind of updates coming from the locations and the favorites that I'm actually following for activity. So I don't have to actually go looking for it. Actually, when there's new updates, a red dot will appear in the update stream on both the mobile and the desktop interfaces. And I think that the other thing that we wanted to kind of capitalize on is reusing data from previous projects that you've been working on. So not having to reinvent the wheel every time you start a new project. You can actually reuse documentation or content from a previous project as a starting point for a new project. So being able to find content, copy it, use it, and then work on it as new content is really important. So being able to do that directly within a single interface is something that Harmony really excels at. So for example, here, I could maybe search for some content. Let's say we've now got an accident or an incident on the project that we're working on, and I need to find like maybe a previous template that we've used. So I can search within SharePoint. It will return any results that the SharePoint search service has found. And then, for example, I can preview that content to see, okay, there's some documentation that I could utilize there. And I can go ahead and even navigate directly to where that document has been found. So what we can do is then we can reuse, for example, a document that maybe I've used there, and I can copy and paste it into a new library. In a similar way, accessing content from different repositories, whether that's OneDrive, Teams or Groups, and SharePoint throughout the process of managing a project, allows me to be able to move and copy content between those, because it might be, for example, I've actually started planning a presentation that we want to use for a new project. So if I go to my All Sites view here, we can see that I've got access to not only my SharePoint sites, but also my OneDrive. So if I go into OneDrive, I can see, for example, maybe I've got a contract or something that I've already started working on, maybe a new template or something. And again, I can view that document directly from here without having to go and open it in Word, for example. So I can say now I want to use that and share it with other people. So it's in my OneDrive at the moment, but actually I want to copy that document and I want to put it into a team that I'm working in. So let's go and search for a team or navigate to, let's say, the team that I'm a member of, and say that here I actually want to paste that document and share it with the other members of that team. Obviously, I can choose to update the name, the file name, and the title and things as well. But then I can also say, okay, now that's been shared with some colleagues, with the members of that team, and I can see who that's currently shared with and things as well. But now I actually want to put that into SharePoint. So in a similar way, I can copy that document from a team and then go to where we were working before to say, okay, now I want to put that in a SharePoint site and paste it there. So I can use keyboard shortcuts like Control-C, Control-V, or the kind of contextual menus like this. So I can paste it here. And now because it's a SharePoint site, I'm going to be prompted to select like the content type and things like that. So in this case, it could be, as I say, like a proposal or a different type of document. So throughout the project, throughout the life cycle of a document as well as a project, I can use the different elements of Office 365 and the Microsoft kind of stack to utilize them in the best possible way. So with that, we'd just like to ask one final question.
So please let us know if you're already using Harmony, and if you'd be interested in trying the enterprise version of Harmony. And while you're answering the question on your screen, I will ask the questions to Richard of what has come in. The first question, Richard, is what versions of SharePoint are you supporting with Harmony?
Okay, so we've been supporting SharePoint obviously for many years, and supporting all new versions as they come out, but also supporting all the previous versions as well. So in terms of SharePoint, which I think the question was, we've supported SharePoint since WSS3 and everything since then. So whether it's SharePoint 2007, 2010, 2013, 2016 on premise, or SharePoint Online, and it really works in the same way across all of those versions. Obviously, if there's new functionality that was introduced at different versions of SharePoint, then we're exposing those in Harmony as well. But fundamentally, the way that we're communicating with SharePoint is the same, irrelevant of what version it is.
Great, thank you. Someone is saying they can't filter, their filter icon is grayed out, and they're using the Enterprise and SharePoint 13, Microsoft Office Professional Plus 2013. Can you help them?
Right, yeah, absolutely. So often get this question actually. If we just go ahead and just save this document, just finish that process, or maybe just delete it for a second. So for example here, I didn't actually show this, so it's interesting that somebody was asking about that. I assume it's somebody who's already using Harmony. But yes, you can filter your libraries based on different metadata. So as we saw before in this example, this library is I've got a view defined which is being grouped by a particular property, but also I can filter that down. So there's two different ways to do that. One is you've got this filter button, which I assume is what that person was saying is grayed out in their environment. This uses the taxonomy service of SharePoint. So it's only enabled if you have managed metadata or enterprise keywords defined in the library. In this case, I do. So for example, I can click on that and say, okay, I actually only want to see documents that have been tagged for the alpha project. So if I start typing ahead, then the taxonomy service returns valid tags and terms to me. So in this case, okay, I'm going to select alpha as the client name, and we can see there that there's just these documents that meet that criteria. So that's one way of filtering. The other way of filtering is by right-clicking on any column that's being displayed. So for example here, it could be the region, and say I want to select, I only want to see a particular region document displayed, or also maybe documents that have been modified by a particular individual. So in this case, if I just want to see that this has been documents that have been modified by Annie, but that relate to that alpha project. So that's kind of combining both the kind of taxonomy, the taxonomy service type filtering, but also filtering on any other type columns.
Thank you. Is Harmony available as both a hosted and on-premise solution, and how is performance for each?
Okay, so Harmony itself is a client-side application. It's a COM add-in into Outlook. So you install it on your client. There's nothing that you need to add into your infrastructure to actually make that function. And basically you can connect to, as I said before, any SharePoint platform that you have, whether it's on-premise or online. So as an example here, if I just click on my All Sites view here, you can see that I've actually got connections to both some on-premise sites, but also some Office 365 sites. So they actually work in the same way. And basically, once you connect to, once you click on that site, it will connect and return what you should see there. So it works in the same way, whether it's on premise or online.
Thank you. Is there a way to automatically capture content into SharePoint?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, particularly around like email communication, it can be around a project. It could be that you're getting lots of emails and you want to capture everything that meets certain criteria into a particular library. So as I kind of briefly mentioned earlier, you can kind of add things as favorites in Harmony. So for example, here it might be that I've got this kind of correspondence library here. So I've marked that as a favorite. And this is a library where I'm just saving emails for a particular project or maybe a few projects or whatever. And you can see the default view there is showing, email properties and things. But what I can do is, because I've added that as a favorite, like we mentioned before, I can follow it and those kind of things. But also, we've got an option here to make it available as an Outlook folder. And what that means is it then kind of surfaces as a kind of drop-off folder in my Outlook. So I can see a corresponding folder here for this correspondence library here. That means Harmony is now watching this Outlook folder. And anything that gets put in here is going to be uploaded into that library in SharePoint. And the header information is going to be mapped, and the preview information will be created, and the content type will be set, and all that kind of stuff. So all the stuff that you're doing, if you drag and drop into the sidebar, but in the background by the Harmony application. So what that means is I could drag emails into this correspondence folder here, and they'd automatically be uploaded. That's quite handy if you're offline, for example, and you don't have connectivity to your SharePoint site. It means that you can move or copy some emails that you want to upload into SharePoint into this folder, and then when you reconnect, they will be uploaded and captured. But also, to automate that process, we can then use Outlook rules to actually automate that process. So, for example, here, I've actually said that I've got a rule that whenever the word Ravenwood for maybe a project I'm working on is in the subject or in the body of the email, or it could be from a particular group of users or a particular domain or something, then put a copy of that into this drop-off folder, and they'll automatically be captured into the SharePoint. So for example, here, I can see that, for example, I actually sent out an email here to some colleagues, and I saved that email when I sent it. Then I set up that rule that we just saw, that basically whenever I then receive any further dialogue that relates to that, it's going to automatically be captured into that library.
Okay, I want to just give one or two more questions because I want to give us a little bit of time. So here we go. How do I know what the current version of Harmony is and which version I'm on?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first, if you like. The easy way to see what version of Harmony you're on is just to click on the kind of triangle in the top right corner of the Harmony sidebar and click on the About. So I can see that I'm currently running version 6.7, which is the current version of Harmony. So how do I get notified when there's a new version, or how do I find out what's in the new version? It's simply a case of going to the Harmony sidebar, going to the Harmony website, harmon.ie. And if you just scroll to the bottom there and go to support, and click on the documentation for Harmony for Outlook, you can obviously see there's the equivalent for like our mobile versions and our kind of other applications and things as well. But if you just click on the documentation there, you'll see obviously generally kind of user documentation anyway, which is a great starting point. But also if you just click on what's new, then you'll see what the current version of Harmony is, what was added, what was fixed and those kind of things in that particular version, and obviously going back through the history of each version of Harmony. Now, you can also be notified when there's new versions by following our blog. So if you click on the blog at the top of our website, you'll see here there's like announcements of when new versions are out and things. And basically, if you just subscribe to the blog there, you'll be notified whenever there's a new version of Harmony, and also kind of what some other interesting articles and things as well.
Great, thank you. If we haven't answered your question, someone will get in touch with you shortly. Richard, thank you for that presentation. Thank you all for joining us today. You'll receive an email with a link to view the webinar again within a couple of days, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Thank you.